Welcome to Weathering Minds, where we discuss how the weather outside affects the weather inside your mind. I'm your host, Daisy Whittington, and today we're going to explore how specific weather conditions can trigger memories and emotions and discuss the complex interplay between weather, nostalgia, and mental well-being. So let's get into it. So what do I mean by that when I say weather, memory, and nostalgia? What I mean is certain weather, whether it be rain, snow, sleet, sun, can trigger certain memory and emotion reactions. One of the most, I would say, interesting ones being nostalgia. Now, we've already done an episode on seasonal affective disorder. We did an episode on the psychological impact of natural disasters. So they're all kind of intertwined, but I just kind of want to dig deeper into that. So that's what we're going to do today. So the first thing I want to talk about is what are the weather triggers that can trigger these emotions? Well, weather is made up of 6 main components: atmospheric pressure, cloud formation, wind, humidity, and rain. Sorry, 5 main components. So those 5: atmospheric pressure, cloud formation, wind, humidity, and rain. A small change in any of these conditions can create a weather pattern. And it's kind of a known fact within the weather world that every weather pattern can create a ripple effect in some way, shape, or form. This is why weather can be very chaotic, constantly changing, and just spontaneous, because when one thing is triggered, it can lead to a various other weather events. So when one of these events changes, this will cause some type of weather pattern, and these weather patterns are what are evoking people's nostalgia, memory, emotions, etc. So let's dive specifically into nostalgia, because that's a really interesting topic. Studies have actually shown that cold weather can make people feel more nostalgic, while nostalgia ironically makes people feel warm, which that kind of sounds weird, but what I mean by that is there have been studies. The 2 main ones I looked at were from King's College London and the University of Southampton. They've had some really interesting studies on memory, emotion, and the weather. But basically, they would put people in different weather circumstances and ask them questions about whatever their childhood, whatever things that trigger nostalgia. And they found that in colder weather, people would be a little bit more nostalgic, a little bit more reminiscing. But when someone is nostalgic, they tend to feel more warm, more comfortable. So that's just kind of a funny, interesting tidbit I learned. One of these studies I looked at, King's College London, examined how adverse weather can evoke nostalgia. So the research objectives included examining whether adverse weather triggers can lead to nostalgia and if it had any psychological benefits. So the kind of study methodology was they would take participants and they would listen to recordings of nature sounds for 10 days. So this would be wind, thunder, and rain, and they'd be recorded versions, and usually a dark space they would have them listen to it. And they also made them keep a 10-day weather diary to journal their feelings, their thoughts, anything they felt. That also leads me to mention my weather journaling episode if you find that topic somewhat interesting. I have an episode, I think it's just called Weather Journaling, on how weather journaling can be beneficial for your mental health, etc. But yeah, in the case of this study, it was just to journal down their feelings as they were listening to these recorded things. And it was found that environmental factors can trigger nostalgia. And there is some positive effects of nostalgia to people's mental health, specifically emotional regulation benefits, which basically just means that really heightened emotions, whether happy or sad, were kind of mellowed out by this nostalgia. So yeah, that study showed and proved that nostalgia can be specifically made, I don't know if that's the right term, from weather conditions. But another thing I want to look at that's kind of similar to that is sensory memory. And if you don't know what sensory memory is, it's the triggering of vivid memories and emotions through specific environmental cues. And so sensory cues, this can be smell, taste, seeing something, feeling something, the senses basically, They directly connect to our certain brain areas and that are involved in memory and emotion, such as the amygdala and hippocampus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Please correct me if I'm not. And they don't pass through the thalamus, which creates a potent memory response to smells or weather conditions such as rain. So, an example of this, weather conditions like cold, rain, specific cold temperatures and rain, often evoke mood changes, often for the more negative, and can influence memory recall. But they can also increase your focus on the environment and like kind of increase your cognitive functioning, which is actually interesting that it helps with focus in certain people. And I also do want to say like a little bit of a disclaimer. I am going to get a little bit more into the cognitive performance, but same as nostalgia, like everything I'm talking about today, just because like certain types of weather can affect you in these ways doesn't mean it's like that every time. Obviously, every time you go into a cold weather day, you're not going to have increased focus and like be upset. Like, that's not a generality. I'm just kind of saying these are things that have studies have proven that can happen with these weather conditions. Anyways, I wanted to say that just to make it clear. But yeah, so gloomy or rainy weather can increase your focus on the environment and enhance recall. In contrast, warm, humid weather can impair your memory due to reduced cognitive functioning. So warm, humid weather can kind of cause slow reaction times and impair tasks requiring sustained attention. So this extreme heat can be linked to diminished memory retention and processing speed, suggesting that uncomfortable temperatures can interfere with focus. Which this is actually making me think of, this isn't like in my script or anything, but this is making me think of a study I looked at for a research project I did for school. I did a research project on urban heat islands in marginalized communities, which if you don't know what an urban heat island is, it's like the hot pockets within cities that are, hot due to environmental factors. And I just basically looked at them in lower income people of color areas of cities. But yeah, a little bit of context. But I looked at a study for that for my literature review, and it was on 4 cities in the U.S. I forgot which 4. I think it was like Detroit. They did like each corner of the U.S. basically. And they found that in this summer, or like in the hotter months, obviously not the summer, in public schools, it had shown there was worse standardized testing scores, like ACT, SAT, like significantly worse testing scores in these public schools because they did not have the, needed air conditioning and like air levels to have their students to be actually able to think. Because when you think about it, when you're really hot, it's like kind of hard to focus, right? These students had next to no air conditioning for months and months and months on end, and this ended up showing significant statistical evidence that like they were having worse testing scores. So that's like a little bit of evidence of that claim I made. I remember finding that really interesting when I was looking at that research review. But anyways, yeah, that just made me think of that. But yeah, these findings kind of show how sensory triggered memories can not only shape our like emotional response to weather, but they can contribute to nostalgia, these personal recollections, our memory, etc. Let's go a little bit more into the cognitive functioning. So, as I said before, both high and low temperatures can impact cognitive functioning. But so can like humidity, like specifically just humidity. Humidity levels can affect comfort perception and influence our mood and recall abilities. And high humidity in uncomfortable environments can alter our mood, impact our memory encoding, and recall. And combined with these sensory cues of like sound and smell, high humidity can strengthen or disrupt memory associations. And what might I mean by memory association? I know it's kind of like a linguistic word. Is just like you're walking down the street, you feel like you've seen that person before, but like you don't know them well, and you usually realize it's like your mom's dog sitter's friend. Do you know what I mean? Like something random. Humidity can actually, like, there's studies that show like humidity can fully affect that. So that person walks down the street, you might have no idea who they are. And when I say studies, by the way, every research I look into, I am going to link in my works cited. So, you know, I like to keep the episodes pretty brief and not like 45 minutes long. I like to keep them, 10 to 15 minutes. So to just shorten the time, if you're like, oh, that study about this and this sounds interesting, I'll link it in my works cited and you can look at it. Let's also get into some positive and emotional effects of weather, like in, comparison to memory and nostalgia. So some positive effects. Mild temperatures and sunshine tend to improve mood and increase motivation. This is because sunlight boosts serotonin, which regulates your mood and helps manage certain like bad weather or like dark disorders like seasonal affective disorder. And I actually have an episode on this called Sunshine and Happiness. I think it was my second episode of season 1. This is the start of season 2. We just hit 1 year Wuthering Minds, so happy birthday. But yeah, I think it was season 1 episode 2, but I did a whole episode on that. It's a really, really interesting topic, so I recommend you look at it. But yeah, sunlight boosts serotonin, and this can make us feel a lot better during like darker days. And pleasant weather also just, again, I talked about this in sad episode, but I want to bring it up again because I think it's interesting. Pleasant weather can encourage outdoor activities and social interactions, which enhances your mood, because when you go outside, what do? You don't just like sit and lay there. I mean, you can, but usually you go on a walk, you go on a run, you ride your bike, you go to the park, you play with your dog. These are all increasing our endorphins and just making us happier from these endorphins. But there's also some negative effects. Super high heat, like really extreme heat, or intense cold can increase stress, fatigue, and irritability. And these extreme temperatures are linked to negative emotions like frustration, particularly in hot conditions, while very humid or cold weather can impair mood and cognitive performance. So what are some coping strategies for when there are some negative emotions? So there's light therapy. Regular exercise and good nutrition are the 3 kind of main ones. So light therapy, such as those like light lamps that you may have seen before. Again, exercise increases your endorphins, and eating healthy just always helps. Hydration and cooling methods can help mitigate your effects of high temperature, and those with specifically seasonal affective disorder can benefit from structured routines and exposure to light sources during winter months. So yeah, that's really all I had planned for today. I just kind of wanted to do a chill episode. I saw some things, a research paper on nostalgia. I thought that was really interesting, the one from King's College London. And I thought I'd just kind of build off that to make a small little episode for this month. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, you can look my works cited. And thank you for watching Wuthering Minds.